Hello there and welcome back to another episode. My name is Patrick Allen. I'm a licensed realtor with Keller Williams Southern Arizona. And in today's video, we'll be discussing real estate. Cool. I think we got it that time. That one felt pretty good to me. Before I finish the rest of the video recording, how does this shot look? Is everything squared up okay? Oh, okay. How's that? That look better? Oh yeah, I do kind of see what you mean. I have an idea. Better? Cool. So now that we're done with that, we can go ahead and jump into the content of today's video. It has been described as perhaps the greatest teaching tool for any prospective real estate investor. A simulator to test out your own investment philosophies and approaches to risk management. It's also been called one of the most boring board games ever created. Overly complicated, involving entirely too much math, and taking far too long to play through for an entire game. I'm talking, of course, about a board game called CashFlow. Now, with a game design that I would describe as a combination of Monopoly and the game of life, while baking in financial statements and accounting principles to help separate the winners of the game from, well, the other players who take longer to win the game. It started as a passion project created from the minds of Robert and Kim Kiyosaki. After retiring from their own rat race and in choosing to dedicate the rest of their working lives to writing books and educating others on the principles of sound investing. And weirdly enough, after playing the game nearly 1,000 times and testing hundreds of assumptions, I do think that it probably is the best and safest way to hone your own personal investment strategy. In today's video, I will reflect on 4 counterintuitive lessons on investing in real estate that I learned playing the CashFlow board game 1,000 times, and deciding which of these lessons has any business at all guiding my own approach to investing in the real world. Welcome back to your weekly dose of my own opinions about business and investment philosophy. My name is Patrick, and this is my FI Life. Okay, so before we jump into the game strategy and the lessons that I believe that CashFlow can teach us, I think a little bit more background information might be in order. So as described in his best-selling book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, after retiring from their own rat race in the world of entrepreneurship, the Kiyosakis created the Rich Dad Company as a means of furthering their passion to spread financial literacy. And so in addition to publishing dozens of books, lecturing at public meetups, and starting their own podcast, one arm of this new company created a board game called CashFlow, and something of a different approach to helping teach investment. Players begin the game with a job and salary assignment, and then start by going around and around this circular rat race, all the while analyzing and purchasing stocks, bonds, and real estate opportunities. Now, like the classic game Monopoly, players exchange their personal cash for businesses and pieces of property, which increases the monthly income they receive each payday after going along the payday square. However, unlike the anti-capitalist overtones in the classic Monopoly game, the goal of CashFlow is not to bankrupt and force out your fellow competitors, but instead to work with and alongside other players as you build up your own asset portfolio and finance. And as it is in the game of life, players meander through random luck events and lifestyle changes, like having kids or losing your job, or simply having the bad luck of never identifying a reasonable first investment deal to get your wealth building started. Now, this element of random chance contributes to the game's somewhat less competitive nature compared with other more traditional board games. And very like what we all seek to accomplish with our own real-life investing, after multiple savvy investment moves and steadily increasing your passive income from assets purchased along the way, once your passive income number exceeds your character's total personal monthly expenses, you graduate to the fast track, where far more lucrative business opportunities exist alongside once-in-a-lifetime fantasy experience. And technically speaking, the game is won by the first player to be able to land on and afford to pay for their own chosen life's ambition at the start of the game. And although I may have overstated things just a little bit when I said I've played the game through 1,000 times, certainly I've played through it several hundred times over the last 10 or 11 years, and during that time I've managed to take away 4 thought-provoking lessons which seem to hold up in real-life investing arena as well. Some of these are a little bit obvious and others a bit less so, so let's start off with an easy one. Lesson 1, successful investing takes time, like a lot of time. So one totally fair piece of criticism that's been cast at the CashFlow board game is the length of time that it takes to actually play through a game, as well as the wide scope of investing jargon necessary to even be able to keep score. Now, in this way, the game again parallels the board game Monopoly. Unless you choose to play with some pretty creative house rules, you can expect to spend 2, 3, maybe even 4 hours before a novice can successfully escape the rat race. Now, as the game instruction manual points out, every cycle completely around the rat race board is equivalent to 3 months of a standard working and investment lifetime. And each payday represents 1 month of gross income minus personal expenses to create this net cash flow figure that players actually collect each time they cross or land on this payday square. Now, while a particularly savvy, or especially lucky, player can potentially escape the rat race in 1 to 2 cycles around the board, it's more common for 10 or even 15 circles around before the typical player can accumulate the capital necessary to buy enough property to achieve financial freedom. And so even in the semi-ideal world that the board game presents to us, namely a world with multiple deal opportunities for less than $5,000 out of pocket, with unlimited access to both short and long-term financing options to acquire these properties with, as well as a network of fellow investors around the board to share deals with, you can expect you to take the equivalent of 1 to 3 years of investing and reinvesting before you can achieve the promised land. Real estate was never designed to be a get-rich-quick endeavor. And so it follows that the time it takes you to simulate an investment lifetime within the game can be a bit lengthy. And so it's something you really should consider before starting to play. Lesson number 2, different players adopt different risk tolerances. One of the ways the game truly shines as a teaching tool is through introducing 3 distinct classes of investors through these assigned profession cards at the start of the game. Now, you might think that as a well-paid airline pilot, your path to financial freedom will look similar to and perhaps be easier than a janitor or mechanic. But as I found it, the optimal approach to frugality and risk management differs substantially based on your own assigned financial situation. Now, starting with those players who begin the game by earning less than $1,000 a month in monthly cash flow, namely the janitor, truck driver, mechanic, and the secretary. These players tend to do best by taking an extremely frugal approach, scraping their dollars together until the first affordable opportunity to jump into the real estate market finally presents itself. And by contrast, the doctor's $3,500 a month in starting cash flow allows the white-collar investors to breeze out to an early lead with respect to adding stocks and real estate to their portfolios. However, their higher income comes with a cost. Having a much higher standard of living means that the doctor requires an eye-popping $10,000 per month in passive income to achieve what the janitor can accomplish with 1/10 of that figure. And so for those higher income earners like the doctor, the lawyer, or the airline pilot, it's far more important for you to take bigger risks on more deals more often. Not only because their high cash flow position helps insulate them from the downside risk of running across the downsizing square, and we'll cover that a little bit later, but also simply because it takes far more successful deals done to generate the capital necessary to buy the big deals needed to cover their high passive income requirements. And the other 5 players available represent something more like a median income earner and offers much greater flexibility to either take big risks towards generating huge amounts of cash to reinvest, or to take it one deal at a time with shorter term financing and to pay off those short-term bank loans with future cash flow. Now, as a real-life investor-friendly real estate agent, I've learned over the years that risk tolerance is not something that can be taught or assumed in others. In the real world, not only will your own personal financial picture dictate how much you have to gain by investing in the market, but your education, conditioning, and prior experience will also affect your tolerance for risk and willingness to take on debt to purchase real estate deals. It has never been a competition. Instead, these other players sitting around you during the game, or those literally sitting next to you in your own local investor meetup, have their own goals, experiences, and capacity to help you find what you're looking for. And I thought that was a really cool addition to the game. Lesson number 3, wealth is generated from market cards. So this is a lesson that I think would be kind of easy for me to misinterpret. So let's first talk about the function of market cards within the game. So as the players go around and around the board game, collecting paydays, paying for doodads, and analyzing real estate deals, there are also these blue market cards, which represent the goings-on of the real estate and stock markets during the game. Occasionally, these market cards might provide bad news, such as a ruptured main water line in one of your properties that needs a repair, or the notification that a former tenant has damaged one of your rental units as they were being evicted. But more commonly, market cards provide potential buyers for assets that players have in their portfolio. A traditional home buyer in the market might be willing to pay $10, $20, or even $50,000 more than you paid for that condo, single-family home, or duplex in your real estate portfolio. And nearly any asset purchased in the game can be resold in the market if the right buyer comes along. And so the general principle to quickly advance out of the rat race often involves buying one or several starter homes with a low down payment, only to flip this home and to sell it for a relatively large profit in the mid-game via a lucky market card draw. Now, these $5,000 to $10,000 to $30,000 equity pops provides the cash necessary to begin to invest in the big deals, which again provide greater opportunities for high cash flow in commercial properties, as well as in buying functional and profitable businesses. Now, what I think can be lost in translation in the game of cash flow is that the game has no way to include the equity portion of how real estate makes you money. The game is very much centered around the concept of cash flow, in accumulating more cash flow and working towards having enough cash flow to be able to quit your job and be financially independent. But buying a number of low down payment deals is a very inefficient way to approach these goals. And so enter the concept of equity multiples in the market. Large amounts of wealth are generated quickly through the process of purchasing, holding, and eventually reselling real estate as a means of trading up to larger assets. And so what do I think is the lesson in all this? Well, what I've taken from this strategy is that you cannot predict the future nor time the market. Over the course of a game, just as over the course of an investment lifetime, your goals, fears, and priorities will shift and bend over time as these random luck events play out in your own life. It's not required to know every step that you'll take in your wealth building journey, just to understand your financial picture at any given time in the game and to be able to determine your next move. And by buying good deals as often as you can find them, and in maintaining optimism that the future will provide better opportunities than you're receiving in the present, your path forward becomes clear as you walk. And so that brings us to the biggest lesson that CashFlow board game has taught me about investing and about risk management. Lesson 4, there's really only one way to lose the game of CashFlow. Certainly the most valuable thing that playing CashFlow hundreds and hundreds of times has taught me is, in fact, the same lesson that a great advisor and mentor taught me early in my career of real estate sales. Nobody ever loses the game of real estate. They only quit real estate. And so it is in the game of cash flow. After 1,000 trips around that silly little rat race wheel, I've come to find out that aside from buying obviously bad deals or having really bad luck with the market and doodad cards, there's really only one way to lose the game, and that's via the downsizing square. Now, more specifically, there's exactly one location on the board which represents losing your assigned job. And if you're unlucky enough to run across the downsizing square during the game, you must pay an amount equal to your monthly expenses, as well as to skip 2 turns during the game. It's the in-game version of shifting your full-time focus not on investing, but into finding a similarly paying new job, and then once you start that new job, waiting to collect that first paycheck. Now let's take a step back for a minute to a basic principle of investing. Now, as I teach the new investor education subgroups that I run each month, one of the principal ways that an investor opens themselves up to losing in the real life game of real estate is through a combination of over-leveraging and speculating. Speculating in our world is just a fancy term for gambling, assuming that because a piece of property is likely to increase in value over time, that it justifies buying a bad deal today and hoping that a hot housing market will bail you out in the future as both home prices and rents continue to increase. And so by extension, over-leveraging is the idea of using too much debt and not having enough of an equity position in a deal. Over-leveraging can be avoided either by putting down more money into the deal and thus borrowing less money to acquire it initially, or by finding a great deal on a property and buying it below its current market value. You protect against the risk of an asset turning into a negatively cash flowing liability should a bad luck event come up in the future. And as it plays out in the board game, there is no limit to the number of mortgages that you can use to buy new real estate deals, as well as the in-game bank will loan you as much money as you want at any time in the game at a 10% interest rate, allowing the players to borrow money to cover their needed down payment. Now, this could be a recipe for success if the short-term debt is well managed. But investors can get themselves into hot water when they hit upon the downsizing square while in an over-leveraged position. Having to pay out a month of expenses without having inflow of any new cash coming in can necessitate borrowing more money in order to make ends meet. And it's when this increased debt load causes your monthly cash flow number to go negative, the bank will eventually call their loans due and force you into bankruptcy for the rest of the game. The lesson that I would have you take from this is that so long as you keep saving money and keep moving towards buying your next great deal, that this is a game that has no losers. Now, some people will escape the rat race in fewer turns than others, but CashFlow is a game that we can all win every time we play it. Just about the only way to screw it up is by taking on too much debt too soon and finding yourself upside down after a single poorly timed bad luck event that you were unable to recover from. Which brings me to my final verdict. Should you play the CashFlow board game? Well, at the end of the day, I think if you can get past learning what a financial statement is and accept the multiple hour runtime of a standard in-person game, that I cannot recommend enough that you check this game out for yourself if you're a traditional investor-minded person. Anybody can play the game online for free by going to www.richdad.com and signing up for a free account. You can play the online version of the game. But I would even more so encourage you to find a real-life meetup and play the physical board game. The lessons and opportunities thrown around by more experienced game players working together in a collaborative setting will drastically speed up your learning curve, both in the game as well as to help you troubleshoot your investment struggles in real life. And if you don't know of any other like-minded local investors willing to join you for a game, you do now. In partnership with ASREA, the Arizona Real Estate Investors Association, I'm excited that I'll be starting a brand new in-person monthly meetup to play alongside and network with fellow local investors right here in Arizona. Starting in May, on the first Saturday of every month at 10 a.m., we'll be meeting up at the Keller Williams building near River and Campbell here in Tucson, as well as ASREA's main office on 16th Street in Phoenix for coffee and cash flow. So if you live in or ever visiting Arizona and watching this video right now, you can consider this your personal invitation to come join in next month for our next round of the game. Or if you're the antisocial type like I've been known to be, richdad.com will continue to be there for as many free games as you'd like to play through online. So by all means, go simulate your own wild and wacky ideas about how to achieve FI in your own life via that board game. Either way, thanks so much for your time to check out this week's video. If you have a little bit of extra time on your hands, feel free to check out this video recorded a few weeks ago about the current market update that we have in the Tucson housing market as of the end of 2022. If not, we'll see you next week. Again, my name is Patrick, and this has been My FI Life.